Hello there, it's Sarah from Paper Lovely. Thanks for joining me today. I have got 3 cards to share with you that I've created using a stamp set from Right at Home, and this is called Boo Crew. So I'm going to start out here by stamping out these images. There is a really adorable dragon and pumpkin and witch, and then a bat, which kind of reminds me of Stitch. I really wanted to color him blue, and I may end up doing that for a future card, but I did keep him gray for a bat for these few cards here. So I'm stamping this on some Neenah cardstock using my Memento Tuxedo black ink because I'm going to Copic color all of these, and that is my favorite ink to use whenever I pull out my Copics. So I have left out the coloring just to save time on the video, but I will list for you on my blog post all of the colors that I've used. I'm starting here on card number 1. I've got a black card base made from MFT's Black Licorice, and then I have taken one of my Sizzix circle dies and I've trimmed out a circle that measures 3 3/4 inches from some MFT whipped cream cardstock. That's going to create a moon for the backdrop of my scene here. I've added a little bit of art glitter glue behind there, and I'm placing that so just the top is peeking off the edge of the card base. And I'll go ahead and trim that here. Next, I'm going to take all of my little characters and lay them out in my scene. And I'm just going to pull in my stamp set. I want to sort of check the placement of where I want to put my little phrase. I'm going to stamp that on top of the moon. I really loved the sentiments that came in this set. There were several of them, and they're a really cute mix of this sort of script and block type lettering. So I'm just checking the placement of that there, and once I'm happy with everything, I'll again take my art glitter glue and glue all of these guys down. Since my card is pretty flat here at the moment, I am going to take just one layer of some foam tape, and I'll place that behind my dragon to give a little bit more dimension. I used lots of little pieces to try and fill him in, so I have spared you that in the editing. And once I've got all the backing peeled off, I will pop him down on top here. Then lastly, I'm going to glue my little bat on top of the moon. I've grabbed the sentiment, "May your night be full of delight," and I'm going to stamp that using my Simon Says Stamp black ink. And then for the inside, I've got a panel trimmed from that same whipped cream cardstock. This measures 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm going to stamp out the sentiment, "Boo to you from the crew." I've grabbed a few more of my little colored characters here. I'm going to glue those down on the inside panel. And then I'll add some ATG to the back and place that on the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 1. So here for card number 2, I'm going to create a blended ink background. I am working on Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I've got this trimmed to a full front panel size. So this is 5 1/4 by, or I'm sorry, 5 1/2 by 4 1/4. I've grabbed 3 Distress Oxide inks here, but you will see I'll pull in a 4th one. And I'm working my way down from the top here. I've got Picked Raspberry, Seedless Preserves, Wilted Violet, and Iced Spruce. I'm going to add that gray at the bottom there to just sort of ground my scene and create the idea of a road. I've grabbed a Post-it here, and that's going to help me hold on to this as I'm doing my blending without getting any fingerprints in my ink. So once I'm happy with my blending, I will hit this with my heat tool just to help set this ink. And then I'm going to take this over to my Misty, and I'm just laying out my scene here. Make sure I've got everything positioned the way that I would like it. I'm pulling in an additional stamp set. This is from Mama Elephant. It's called City Sidewalks. And it's actually, I think it's from last year or maybe the year before their Christmas release. So I've lined up, there's 3 separate stamps here. There's one that's just one single tall building, and then 2 that are larger clusters. And I've lined those across, and I'm going to stamp those out using my Simon Says Stamp black ink. I will stamp that twice just to make sure I've got a nice crisp image. And then again, I will take my heat tool to make sure that that is nice and set before I move forward with anything else. I've got another circle that I've trimmed using one of my Sizzix dies, again from MFT's whipped cream cardstock. This one measures 1 5/8 inches. I'm going to add some art glitter glue, and I will place that down at the top of my scene. And then there you can see I have laid out all of my characters. Before I place them down, I wasn't sure if I was going to add some dimension or not, so I did want to add my sentiment now, and I decided to go with Have a Bewitching Halloween. So I've lined that up right inside my moon, and I will stamp that again using my Simon Says Stamp black ink. Now again, I've laid out all my characters, and I did decide that I would use art glitter glue for all of these, and then I'm going to pop up my panel on some foam tape. And I did, after I stamped all of my houses in the background there, I did trim this panel down to 4 by 5 1/4. I've grabbed in a card base from MFT. This is made from cement gray cardstock. And here I'm going to go ahead and add that foam tape down. I'll peel away the backing and then place that down on top. For the inside panel, I'm stamping out the sentiment, May your night be full of delight. This is a Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4. And then I toyed around between adding the bat on the inside panel or on the outside, and I felt like on the outside it added a little more gray to sort of balance out that bottom, so I decided to go with that. And then I pulled from my stash some pink washi. I'm going to run that along the bottom of my inside panel. I'll add some ATG to the back and then place that on the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 2. So here for card number 3, I'm using a die from Simon Says Stamp. This is their tri-square die. And I've got a panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4. This is cut from MFT's Orange Zest. I wanted to have one little character peeking out from behind each of these windows. So I'm positioning these, and the dragon, the wings were going to be in the way of the second window. So I knew I was going to have to trim him down. So I'm just lining him up the way I'd like him to be there, and then using a pencil mark so I can trim those wings and still have him fit inside that window. So I'm just going to cut that excess part away and then get everything lined up here. And I wanted to add some dimension to the top to my panel. So what I decided to do to keep everything in position was I grabbed some of my Post-it tape, and as I positioned each of the little characters in their window, I added just a little bit of Post-it tape behind the characters so that it would stick to the back of my top panel here. You'll see this a little better in a second when I flip it over. And that way I could temporarily hold these in place. There we go. And then I'll do the same for this last character as well. So that's going to hold them in place on the panel as I flip it over. Just doing a little readjusting there. Okay, there we go. Now you can see a little better. And then I'm going to trim off just the little edge of that witch's hat. And I'll grab my art glitter glue and I'm going to place that on the portion that isn't covered by the Post-it tape. Now I can take this panel and line it up on the front of my card base and press all of those characters into place. And then very carefully, I will peel that panel up. And then I'll get rid of that excess tape. I'm going to add some foam tape behind this panel. And then I'll peel away the backing and place this right down on top of my card base. For my sentiment, I decided I wanted to go with hand over the candy and nobody gets hurt. I thought that was really cute. And I'm gonna go ahead and heat emboss this. I've grabbed a scrap piece of black licorice cardstock. I've hit that with my powder tool here, and I'll stamp this out using my Versamark ink. And then I'll heat set that using Simon Says Stamp Fine Detail White Embossing Powder. I've trimmed that down, and because I have my panel already popped up, I'm just going to make a few little pencil lines there so that I can get this trimmed down to the right size. And then I'm going to add some 1/2-inch Scor-Tape to the back of this. And I'll peel away the backing and go ahead and place that underneath those windows. I'm going to use my ruler just to make sure I've got that nice and straight. Then finally, I'm going to add one of the little bats off to the side here. For the inside, I've got a Nina panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4. I'm going to stamp out the sentiment "Boo to You" from the crew, and I've used some Lawn Fawn fake tan ink for this. Lastly, I've grabbed another one of these dragons here. I'm going to go ahead and add some art glitter glue behind that, and I'll place that down on the panel. I'll add some ATG to the back, pop that on the inside of the card base, and that will complete card number 3. Here are a few close-ups of the finished cards. In the description box below, you'll find my blog post, which has additional photos and links to the supplies I used. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a comment or a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.